Hi everyone, welcome to the Defended by Nature podcast, the show where I explore whether restoring natural processes and features can defend us against some of our biggest global challenges, such as flooding, drought, poor water quality, food security, and declining biodiversity. I'm Kat Teakle. I'm a hydrologist with 19 years of experience as a consultant specialising in flood risk management and restoration of water environments. In this episode, I'm talking with Nick Ney. He is a senior project manager at Practicality Brown Habitats. Join us as we discuss delivering nature-based solutions from the perspective of the contractor. We discuss the importance of forward planning and understanding a site's baseline conditions in order to see success on the ground. I can't wait for you to listen in on our conversation. But first, can I ask a small favour? If you enjoy our conversation today and think that someone you know might find it interesting, please, can you share it with them? Okay, let's get started.
Hello.
Hi Nick, how are you?
Yeah, I'm just close to the window, got a lot of traffic going past the window. How's things?
Good. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. No, thank you for the invite. I'm slightly surprised you asked, to be honest. It's not.
I've just really wanted to speak to a whole range of people about this question, about what we're doing, because we're doing so much of it, so much nature-based stuff,
Yep.
so much kind of restoring natural processes and features. And I just thought it would be so interesting to just talk to lots of different types of people with so many different types of jobs and just kind of see what comes out, like shake the tree a bit and see what comes out.
Yep.
It started last year because I did the scoping study for an estate in Southeast England. And the kind of outcome of that scoping study was that they asked me to put together like a team, and they'd collaborated with Natural England, and Natural England had asked for all these disciplines. And so I found myself having to find soil scientists and archaeologists and local ecologists that could kind of help with different, like, so there was deer, there was but there were invertebrates and fresh water, but there were also like large mammals. And so I had to speak to all these different ecologists and all these different people kind of, and I'm used to building a team, and I'm used to working with engineers, and I'm used to working with like hydraulic modelers, and sometimes with people like you that are constructing. But it was like so many different types of people,
Yep.
and the conversations we had were so interesting. And I thought, well, let's see if some people will be happy for me to ask them some questions. Maybe we can like edit it up and make it into like a bit of a podcast and just see what happens. I mean, no pressure or anything, but
Thanks.
I just thought like for the other side, the benefit for you, Nick, might be that someone learns a little bit more about your job specifically. And perhaps that improves relationships and communication, and at what point they bring you into the project instead of waiting until everything's designed up. Perhaps they realize that as an outcome of this conversation, I'm just guessing, but perhaps they bring you in earlier and that makes your job easier. Maybe that makes their job easier.
Yep.
Maybe there's more collaboration from an earlier point, plus an opportunity for you to raise the profile of your business. So I kind of thought it might be like a bit of a win-win sort of thing. Does that sound good?
Yeah, no, it sounds great. I mean, it's said I've been in, how long have I been Pratt Brown for? July last year, I jumped across from EcoSula. So yeah, here we are. Where are we? 11 months now almost. And yeah, it's 11 months. 11 months in next week. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, up to. And then Joel joined a month later. So yeah, it is a new department, which is nice. Yeah, and they've kind of given us free rein to do what we want to do, to work with who we want to work with, which is really nice. Yeah, I don't have the not the pressure. That's the wrong word. I don't have the constraints that were placed previously. So
Okay.
yeah, it's nice. You know, it is a new department, and obviously, you know, between Joel and myself, we do have 35 odd years experience. Joel's not actually here today. Joel is currently along the River Blythe for Warwickshire Wildlife Trust,
Yeah.
digging out a paleo channel. So that's what he's up to. I'm up there tomorrow and Wednesday, and I was up there Tuesday and Wednesday last week. So and then holiday next week.
Nice.
which we'll get onto because there was very much a question at the end, wasn't there, about read a book, lie on a
Oh,
beach. Yeah, we'll come to that one in a minute because that's
okay.
exactly what I'll be doing.
Okay.
So how do you want to run it? How do you just ask questions, or you just want me to just
Yeah. I thought maybe I'll ask a couple of questions, trying to be open ended, and you can just chat away. And the
waffle?
only idea, well, quite often from waffle come these wonderful conversations. So I've kind of given the questions,
Yeah,
and I gave a breakdown of like why I was asking each of the questions. So it's not like, what is she doing here? I wanted to like give you an opportunity to introduce yourself so people know who you are and they learn that, you can what you're saying, they can trust it because you've got all this experience. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your job is and what you do, and then to kind of get into kind of nature-based solutions and what you've seen being out there, which some academics and some technical specialists, especially early careers, they might not be going out on site as much as you and I.
yeah,
And so actually your on the ground viewpoint of things is important, I think. And then
yep,
I got fun questions because I think it's nice to humanize us and kind of remind everybody that we are humans and we like, the same things. And it just gives a
yeah.
bit of an insight into who you are. I thought it was a
Yeah,
bit of
no,
fun.
exactly. And I think that's important because that's ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you're working for a tier one contractor, Kia or Balfour Beatty, or, a private residency. Ultimately, we are all just human and we're all just trying our best. And, we don't necessarily know it all. Mm.
No,
And we certainly don't try to know it all because you simply couldn't. So, yeah, no, yeah, it's about building collaborative relationships. Don't know why I
it
did.
is.
Don't know
It's
why I
all
did
about
that. Just
collaboration.
collaborative. What if we say collaborative? Everyone does this sort of circular thing, don't they? I don't know why that is. It's very strange. Yeah.
Global.
It's global. Yes.
Global communication.
So, I guess.
If
I've,
you could just introduce
yep.
yourself and kind of go into like kind of details about where you're based
Yep.
um and I've asked that question of what's the one thing that you always like to tell people. So, but yeah, maybe start with introducing yourself and we'll go
Yeah.
from there.
So I'm Nick May, senior project manager for Practicality Brown Habitats. Been here for 11 months now, having spent 10 years previously at Ecosoulis, and then bit of a self-professed wetland. I won't say expert because that's the wrong word. I do not profess to be an expert. I just enjoy splashing around in puddles and stuff.
Just
Um,
enjoy it.
but it's more than just wetlands as as rivers and streams. It's everything. It's brooks, it's ditches, it's mangroves, lakes, swamps, ponds, peatlands, all of it. Although I am a self-professed wetland person, I do and have done a whole load of other nature-based solutions, habitat creation, ecosystem restorations projects, whether that's tree planting. I project managed so much tree planting over the last 10 years. Eye-watering numbers. I can't even put into, God knows, I know, 200,000 trees,
Wow.
10, 15 hectares of wildflower grasslands probably in total. So yeah, it's everything because it's not about just wetlands. It's about building healthy ecosystems. And generally speaking, you generally get one and there's the other. They all generally work side by side, and that's it because everything that we do is actually led for biodiversity, as opposed to flood prevention or narrowing it down into very. It's actually we look at it very much as a biodiversity led company department as opposed to just restoring rivers because we need to do what we can to try and restore biodiversity because the world seems to be not giving too much of a monkeys. Based in Bristol. Obviously, I don't have a Bristolian accent. I don't say a farmer or cider. I am from the east. I am Essex born and bred originally. I moved down to the West Country in 2000. So I've been here 25. In fact, I've been in the West Country longer than I've been in the East. So practically a a Southwest person. So yeah, that's me. That's who I am. Yeah.
Okay, great. Do you have one thing that you trot out, you say regularly to people? Like I gave the example for me, I when I meet clients and we're talking about options and solutions for solving something, I often find myself saying, you know, we don't need to take a hard engineered approach. We really don't need to pour concrete. There's often a more sustainable option. We could probably put in a filter drain instead of a pipe, and it will probably look better and it will probably be more effective. It's more sustainable and often it's cheaper. Do you have anything like that that you like to say regularly?
Yeah, I say quite a lot, and especially to designers. No offense to designers or landscape architects, take a step back.
Okay.
Don't rush into your designs. Yeah, I know you want it, and the client may want concrete head walls everywhere or whatever, but actually, it's about getting that information first and foremost. You touched on it in our in our brief chat. Soil samples. If you're going to create a wildflower grassland, you need to know what soils are there, what the composition is, what are what's the nutrient levels, is it clay, is it chalk, all of these bits and bobs. You need to get that information first. Don't just reach for the first off the shelf seed mix, because that's what you've been taught. Very few people put their head above the parapet. I find that the client gives them the design brief and that's what they design. They don't question it. And it's only really when we come around and go, well, actually, your grass seed mix, that ain't gonna take. You've specified an acid neutral grass mix and you've got a calcareous grassland over there.
Right.
What's the point? You might as well just go and burn the money. So, but also it's also about, what did the site look historically? What was it historically? Open fields, probably, if you go all the way back. But what have you done on, have you used LiDAR? LiDAR's a wonderful tool to see what was there previously, a couple of hundred years ago. You can see old rivers and old paleo channels and ponds and all that sort of stuff. So it's slow down, have a think, get all the information, do your research, then go out and design it. Your client may not appreciate it, but at least then you can say you've done the right thing. If the
Mhm.
client doesn't take it up, then so be it. But we've got to at least try, and that's everybody. That's everybody from designers all the way through to contractors on site, because it's only if there's a collaborative voice going forward, then more and more clients will take that on board. And I think we're seeing, especially from the Environment Agency, we're seeing that real big push for nature-based solutions and NFM. And it's not all about concrete channels, to get rid of the water through towns and cities. You're always going to have those. That's just part and parcel. If we insist on building on floodplains, we've got to try and protect those houses. But but we are seeing it, in the EA's framework 2023, I think it was. There was a lot of stuff in there about nature-based solutions and NFM, and that's a good thing. Obviously the Environment Agency did their whole pilot project back in 2019, 2020, around that really bleak time of COVID. But yeah, it's just take a step back, have a think, move forward.
Great. I like it. No, I like it. That's great. I think that's really good advice is take a step back, consider all the
Yeah,
information. If you don't have all the information, go and get it. And yeah, and then make informed decisions.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's great.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to learn a bit more about how would you describe your job title? What do you call your job title?
Senior project manager.
Project manager.
Yeah, which is kind of the same title I had at EcoSulis, but it's now a whole lot more than just managing projects. Sales, marketing, finance. It's because it's a new department. The guys that are coming to Practicality Brown, they don't have. They've been around for 40 odd years. Um,
Okay.
and historically, and they still are, a mechanized devegetation. So they do a whole load of tree felling and scrub clearance and that sort of stuff, but on big scale, big excavators, all that sort of stuff. Or as team demolition, as I call them. But they've obviously entrusted Joel and I to come in and create this department, which is exactly what we are doing. So we're working with the clients we want to do with, but it's all about having those relationships. So although I project manage, my job now is all encompassing, and there's a whole load of other stuff. I do have people helping me. It's not just me. I do have Emily, Hannah, Ellie, all those people helping me do the sales and marketing. But ultimately, it's all falling on Joel and my shoulders until such time as the company's big enough or the department's big enough to have those individual team members, which is quite nice.
Yeah. So your role then, so do you kind of plan out how you're going to construct out the sites? Is that what you
Yes.
do? You kind of
So
take the design and then you implement it, or how, like, is that kind of like, that's the bit, I mean, so I know you like got all your project management stuff, which I'm sure takes up a huge chunk of your time, but under that kind of category of project management, do you like, does someone provide you with the design and then you work out how you're going to construct it, or do you just literally take the design and it's very as simple as
It entirely depends on the client. So some of the clients we work very much with from get go, from concept, yeah. So we have our partners that do design for us. So literally, we can offer an end to end service, design, construct, and everything in between. Some clients really like that because it means they can just come to us and go, right, got this harebrained idea. We want to do this. This is what we want to do. Can you go off, speak to your soil scientists, speak to your designers, speak to your hydrologists, and then come up with a scheme?
yeah,
Other clients have already done all the design stuff. They've been designed by one of the competitors or someone who's not a competitor, and then they've just gone. There's the design. Can you price it? Yes. Here you go. Here's a price. And then, oh, you've won it. Now go and build it. So it entirely depends on what it is the client's after and how we get to that. Obviously, the earlier that we're brought in, not just we, but you wouldn't want to go anywhere else anyway. But generally speaking, if you come to us, the earlier you can get us in, the earlier we can make sure that everyone's on the same pages. Because what you generally notice especially on these big construction projects, is the designer would have designed the design. The designer would have designed it. Right, hold on. 3 years, 2, 3 years ago, before they'd even got onto site, and things
yeah,
change. And actually, when you start putting a bucket in the ground, the whole it's just like, oh, well, that's not doing what we thought it was going to do. Okay, well,
mm,
that's life. So, but then you end up getting cost increases and stuff like that. So, because the what they've come up with isn't fit for purpose or doesn't fit what they're trying to do. Um, when it's
do you
cost.
ever have, oh sorry, do you ever have a situation where you're given a design and actually the levels are so slight or the design's so intricate that it's actually quite difficult to construct? Do you ever have, like, is there anything like
Uh,
that that ever happens, that it's like, that it's sometimes, I know I've had projects where the site is so flat that you're trying to put a slope in, but you're constrained by the upstream and the downstream, and you're like, do you have challenges like that?
yeah, I mean, you could argue that Belmont Estate was relatively flat. As he says, looking at the picture, the excavations above your head, the arguably the field was flat, and actually over the 400-meter long channel, it drops 2.5 meters or 2 meters, or dropped. So you then have to work your levels out accordingly, and then you're using your levels. You then create that artificial drop,
Mhm.
but then you also then have you then get to the end, the outflow, and you find that all the historic dredging works that had gone on had been dumped at that end. So actually, what you're not excavating 2 meters, you've ended up excavating 3 meters, 3.5 meters, and then therefore you've had to do a whole load of other earthworks to regrade that land to make it fit. So it didn't look like
Yeah.
that. It ended up looking a bit more like that. So yes, it does happen, but it's them working with the client to say, well, look, we can't quite get that drop, that gradient. So actually, let's create pools, riffles, all of the good naturally occurring systems that you can then go, well, okay, well, let's create a pool here, and we'll let that fill up, and that will then overtop and then carry on, and so on and so forth. So you can, it's just about thinking about, it's just about thinking really, and going, well, okay, well, we're not quite getting a drop here. How do we do it? What can we do? Can we raise the bed level up?
Yeah.
Because obviously earthworks are expensive, especially if you're
Yeah.
having to tip everything off site.
Right.
If you can keep the material on site, great. If you have to take it off site, can we reuse it? Yep, great. Or no, actually, we've got to send it to landfill and they use it as capping.
Mm.
But those last two have a cost. They have a haulage cost.
Mm.
And if you're paying 200, £300 a load for 20 tons, I mean,
That is
Belmont,
very.
it is very expensive. I mean, Belmont was 20,000 cube that we excavated. Fortunately enough, all the stuff on the site, but an 8-wheel dump truck, 8-wheel lorry only takes 14 cube.
Right.
Think how many lorries that would have, all that carbon, inconvenience for the local population, etc., etc. So,
Yeah. Plus the compaction of them tracking backwards and forth across the
yeah,
site.
yeah, all of the above,
Yeah.
all of the above.
Yeah.
So, but no,
Right.
there are ways and means, and you do come across the odd site where it is dead flat, and then you're having to play around with levels. But as a
Yeah.
whole,
Is it often a feedback loop between you and the client rather than you and the designer then? Is that normally how
um,
you see
it,
how
it
does that normally?
it entirely depends on the project and how the client's got it set up. Uh, for Belmont, was the designer was no longer involved, and so it was us and the client, and we kind of took on that role of principal designer. It's similar to what we're about to do for Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust, which starts 9th of June, is when we mobilise. Is the project was designed by a competitor. It went out to open tender, and now they've obviously we've won the works to do reaches 1, 3, and 4, on the river, and then but we've also assumed principal designer. So there's any changes that come about is obviously in discussions between us and the client, because there is no designer. We're effectively, we
You've
are the
assumed.
designer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting. Do you ever, this is me being really nosy, do you ever use like the laser guided buckets or anything like that? Or do you literally go out and do you set it out with topographic surveyors? How do you
So
normally, or do you do your own kind of setting out?
we use a mix. We generally, I'm not a big fan of using Lakia mounted excavators. I think they are too restrictive. The one thing that we do use is Encon buckets. It allows the bucket to swivel 360 and do all that, so you get really good contours and all, but without having to move the excavator all the time. Whereas I find that if you're working to set levels, especially in wetlands, you can't necessarily get the finer details done. It's fine if you're building a bridge or a railway line or whatever, because you need that exact. But
Yeah.
we're working in nature. Nature
Yeah.
doesn't do straight lines. Nature's not exact. So that's why I don't use them. I just think they're not a waste of time, because they do have their place. But I think for wetland stuff, they're a bit almost a bit pointless in that regards. So generally speaking, we're quite old school. We'll be out there with a laser level and a staff. So we'll
Mhm.
take datum points and then work our way down. Some sites we do have setting out. Some of the sites that have been designed, we'll give a whole load of setting out points, and this is what they want to do, and this is where it's going to go. So you need to have someone with a total station. So you bring in your site engineer, and he marks it all out, and everyone's happy. But generally speaking, we try and be a bit more fluid. Is a good word.
Yeah.
Is a word I'd use for especially when you're doing new channels, because
Hmm.
it's because you don't know actually, if you set something out and you plan it out, you end up going, well, actually those curves don't look right, because someone's drawn it on CAD, and actually
Yeah.
what may look great on CAD, actually when you do it, you sit there and go, "Hmm, that's not quite right because the levels, you're coming down at X increment and you're getting
Yeah.
this, it doesn't work. So we generally try and keep it a bit more fluid.
Okay, that's really interesting. I guess because I come from kind of the flood perspective, and we're like looking at like very precise levels. And I think that's so interesting to have that feedback that actually sometimes perhaps we're over worrying about the intricate detail of the design. And actually, what you're saying is when you're on site, actually, the feel of like what you're doing actually can mean actually that's a bit tight, or that's a bit too, that doesn't quite sit, or perhaps you've come across some dredgings, or you've come
Yeah,
across, you pick up old river terracing and you're like, oh, actually, we could use this in a certain way, or gravels or whatever. And
exactly.
so
Yeah.
actually, and you can do all your baseline studies and investigations, but actually, until you actually dig into the ground, you don't know what you're going to find. And actually, not worrying quite so much as long, perhaps it's more of a case of saying, like when I design stuff, maybe I need to be a bit more like, if we start here, as long as we end up there, that should flow.
Yeah.
And actually, nature's quite dynamic and changing anyway. So, actually, not being so tight in our designs, perhaps that's got a positive thing. That's really
Yes.
interesting.
And that's exactly. I mean, it's a really interesting because there was a project that I was involved in historically, and the designers forcing the principal contractor to go back in. So the riffle. So when they put the riffles in, they basically large. They weren't riffles. They they weren't even weirs. They were just large stone across the watercourse to sort of step down, which is quite
Oh, a
cool.
bit like a rocky ramp, was it? Was
Yeah,
it,
sort of, but they were just one line
yeah.
gap, another line. So yeah, it was just it wasn't even fist. It was just lines of boulder basically. But these moved during a flood event, and everything else then carried on around it. But the designers are making the contractor to go back in and reset these boulders.
Mm,
Why? They're
yeah.
only going to move anyway. They're not set in concrete. They are literally just placed and set in subsoils and in the gravels. Why waste the money and the time of forcing someone to go back in because it's arguably a defect? It is a defect. They shouldn't have moved. But they're only going to. What happens when everyone's demobbed and gone home, and you have another flood event? Are you then going to get the contractor to come back in and reset them? Of course you're not.
Mm,
But so why are we doing it now?
yeah.
Because that's what water does. You know.
Yeah.
So
So maybe there's an argument for we put things in place and accept that they're going to move and they're going to be dynamic, they're going to be changing. And as long as we feel that there's no risk downstream,
yeah,
maybe saying that that's okay.
yeah,
And maybe that needs to come into our design as well. That if we're putting in things in place that are so fragile that they might move and their movement might lead to risk to others, maybe we shouldn't be doing them in the first place.
exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's having sense and sensibility and going, well, actually, what is it we're doing here? Why are we doing it? And then inform with the design because of it, or going, actually, you know what? They're going to move regardless of what we do. Let's just leave it. I mean, literally, they moved 10 centimeters. So
Oh,
not,
very
they didn't even
marginal.
move meters. Literally, you're talking centimeters from
Right.
where they were meant to be. And you're sitting there going, it's only going to happen again. Why bother?
Mm.
It's not going to make
Yeah.
a huge, it's not going to change the hydrology of that river in any way, shape, or form, whether they're there
Mm.
or there. It's
Mm.
bonkers, but that's the way it is.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to have a quick scan through some of the questions. So, a question I think is really interesting is how do you define a successful project? What makes you get to the end of a project and think that went really well? I'm really proud of that. Is it just we did that on budget, like, or is it more than that? Is it, what is it that makes you think, "Oh, this was a great project," and makes you, like, your heart sing a little bit? Do you have any of those projects?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple. Belmont, obviously, I've already touched on that several times. That was the entire of summer 2023, which is great. Then I had stuff like Clay's Lake, which is a project that I was basically managed. It started in 2016 and finished last year. So 8 years of construction and then maintenance.
Yeah.
It wasn't all construction. It was construction and maintenance. But that looked really good. When I went to my last site visit last year, you sit there and go, yeah, that was a job well done. It had its trials and tribulations, but it was a job well done. And then you have other stuff, slightly more. Then you have, the higher prestige ones. I like the NFM pilot project for the EA. There was only a handful of contractors that partook, but being on something that gave the EA, or it was then going to enable the EA to start monitoring natural flood management interventions, that was quite cool. That's a project you go, yeah, that was really good to work on. So the definition of good projects is, or what makes a good project, good end result, is entirely different. Some is all about money. There were a lot of companies that made a lot of money off HS2. Is that is that a good project financially? Yes, but as a mitigation for a railway line that do we need in the UK? Maybe. Was it worth all the wanton destruction and the massive great scar that now runs through, Buckinghamshire and Northamptonshire? Was it really worth it? Is it going to be really worth it? Probably not. But so it's entirely, it's a move that moves from project to project as a there is no right answer or wrong answer.
No. So, do you think when you sat there and thought this was a project well done, was it because you could see the environments you'd created and thought, and you could hear the birds, and you could see that it was naturally established? Like, what was it that made you think, oh, like this was a job well done? What was it when you were like there? Was it that you could see that it settled down, or was it still like bare earth at that point? Like, just trying to like understand, like,
Yeah,
what's the magic sort of thing
yeah.
of like,
But
like, understand that it changes from project to project. I'm just wondering, like, you know, is it standing there looking at it thinking, yeah, I can see this has worked? Or was it like the partnership was great with the client, the kind of everything flowed, that was clearly structured, and and after 8 years we still maintained a great relationship? It's like, what was it for you?
Clay's was very much like that. So it was an environment agency project. It was managed by Jacobs, and then obviously we did or me and my team at EcoSulis at the time. So we did a whole load of tree planting, wetland planting, grassland creation, and then maintenance of it. And when you put 8 years worth of work in, you sit there and go, at the end of it, it was only last year that we started finally getting yellow rattle to appear. Yellow rattle establishment is a pain in the proverbial. But we also then had a whole load of oxeye daisies starting to appear, like not just like little ones, big, chunky, and that sort of. You sit there and go, it's taken me, 8 years to get this far, and now you're appearing as we're closing the door and walking out the gate. So at the end of it, it was kind of like a really nice, well done, guys. That was a job well done. The design, for example, had lots of rock armor put in, not as in rock mattresses, but just rock, smashed into the bank, basically, just to limit some of the erosion. And the first thing he said is, I don't want all this rock armor because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in with the river. So we looked at how we could change things on site to limit the use of rock armor, which was great, because obviously then it then fitted in more within the landscape rather than having lots of import. To be fair, the stone we used was brought in from the Mendips, so it was only 20 miles away. So it wasn't, it didn't have a huge, it was locally sourced, but it's having that relationship. So each project is entirely different, and some of them you sit there and go, yeah, that was it. As a project, I'm hoping that the River Ash is one of those Belmont projects. Short 3-month project, do a whole load of cool stuff along the River Ash, which is obviously a chalk stream. And obviously, chalk streams are rare and in decline and just generally abused. And I'm hoping that we can replicate that on the Ashes we had with Belmont.
Yeah. So perhaps it's kind of doing good, kind of making a positive change to the environment, not always seeing it like in the time time span that you're involved, but actually knowing what you've done will have a positive change in the future.
Yeah. As I said right at the outset, it's all for biodiversity, it's all for ecosystem recovery and nature restoration. What the end goal for me is, well, that's what it is. For a client, it may be entirely different, but generally speaking, that's what we look at. It's nature positive projects.
Nature positive. And I guess that leads us on really nicely to like kind of that question of, are restoring natural processes and features benefiting, in your case that's where your concentration is, in biodiversity? You actually see that? Do you see that regularly, or is it like you said in the project you're involved in, within 8 years you started to see that natural reestablishment of, like, I guess must be in the seed bank, or do you plant it in those wildflowers and things, or like, is so you've actually seen that? Do you see it regularly? Do you revisit your sites and see it regularly?
I mean, I'd love to go back to all the sites. Some of them I can, some of them I do. Some of them are obviously open to the public, some of them aren't. But generally speaking, in answer to the question, yes, there is evidence, that especially wetland work and nature-based solutions does reduce flooding and will increase water quality. There's a lot of research out there and being done by the Environment Agency, by private bodies, by individuals. There was a really good talk on at the River Restoration Conference in April. Some guy had basically built natural flood management barriers over a whitewater rafting place up north to test how leaky a leaky dam should be. And obviously the different materials and stuff like that. So there's still research going on, and we're proving that these systems work. Getting people then to start adopting them, you can't need the evidence to go along with it. So if you can prevent flooding, improve water quality, therefore you are holding water on the land longer, generally speaking, because that's where the nutrients then fold in. So therefore you're increasing the fertility of the ground and the water content of the ground. Therefore you're never going to stop droughts. Hopefully. I mean, I'd love for the summer to be bone dry, but I'm sure there's a lot of farmers that don't wish for it to be bone dry, and we could really do with some rain.
Yeah.
But obviously, keeping the water on the land means you're limiting the effects of drought. Therefore, you're improving the chances of food and food
Yeah.
production. So, yes, wetlands are the driver. So yes, and there is a fair amount of research that you can pull from it and go, yeah, okay, I think we'll get in there eventually. But
So looking at some of the pictures I saw of, is it Belmont, the
yeah,
Belmont is, and other, not just that, like lots of other river restoration projects, and also sometimes like wetland construction, pond construction, they can be very disruptive to kind of the soil. Like there's a high risk of compaction. It looks like
a mess.
devastation
Yeah.
whilst you're in it. Do you think it's worth causing that level of disruption to reinstate nature-based solutions? Do you see that, like, in your job? Like, do you see, right, basically completely dug up a site like Belmont or wherever and exposed all this soil? And I'm guessing you have ways of piling the soil, do you, to
Yeah.
like kind of keep the seed bank separate and to kind of put that back later? Does that lead to this kind of explosion in biodiversity? And do you think it, like, that actually are there enough methods to kind of manage soil mobilization and to manage compaction to kind of offset that kind of impact with kind of the benefits that you're hoping to achieve by putting in that kind of remeandering or the wetland area or the pond? I'm not trying to trip you up or anything. I'm genuinely
Yeah.
interested, like, because there's lots of conversations about stage zero versus these more like kind of invasive kind of approaches. But actually, what I'm really interested in knowing is, like, do you see actually that it's really, really worth it? Like, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, Belmont's another really great Belmont is just a great example of everything.
Yeah, no, tell me all about Belmont. Yeah.
So Belmont Estate is an estate just by Bristol Airport. Really good because it's nice. It was nice and close to home. Love that. It's very rare that you get projects that big on your doorstep. It's wonderful. But it was taking the Landio River, which had been cannibalized over centuries of farming. It was that particular part came through a woodland, and as it came out the woodland, was then basically dead straight for about 400, 500 meters across these one farmer's field and what then was or what is Watercress Farm, and which the estate owned, and it just been dredged. Yeah, it was deep, it was incised. I mean, it had vegetation growing along the banks, but it was just a dead straight channel. And unsurprisingly, when it rained, the water just used to hurl it down there. It had no connectivity to its floodplain, and that was replicated. No, that was shown by the estate have cattle. They have a herd of cattle, small herd, and then two pigs. Now, for those of you who remember the video or videos on the walk and talks that I did back in 2023, you would always the pigs always manage to make an appearance. They're actually stars. They're actually social media stars. They're great, and they're really friendly. They'd come up. As we were demobbing, they were laying in front of the dumper, like, don't leave, kind of thing. It was so sweet. But the pigs never used to root in that field because it had been farmed. It was devoid of anything of value, of nutrient value to the pigs. The cows would go in there occasionally and have a munch, but again, very little
Yeah.
benefit to and if cattle and pigs aren't using it, and that there's nothing there. What the estate was starting to see was areas of bramble. So one of the things that Gil wanted us to do was put our haul roads around these patches of bramble. So if you ever look on some of the overheads, he says as he looks above the screen again, the haul roads would do that. But, why aren't you doing that? No, because there was a patch of bramble there, so it was having one haul road effectively in and out, and then one haul road up to the stockpiles to avoid brambles, because the brambles are one of those species that show that the ground's recovering. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to go down to Belmont. We were down there 4 5 weeks ago. We went down there last summer. So I've kind of seen it develop over the last 2 years, and you start seeing those improvements. You've now got grasses appearing on the banks. You've got rushes and stuff appearing in along the old channel that is now impounded and acts as a backwater. And so all this, if you ask the question, is it worth it? Then yes. The one thing that wetlands do a lot quicker than tree planting does is you generally get to see the results a lot quicker.
Right.
You plant a tree, it take 20 years before you start seeing it do anything cool. But so yes, it does have, it is worth it, but it's also then managing what you've got and how you move those soils around. So your
Yeah.
haul roads, you don't run if it's too wet, all of and then putting it back as it was or repairing the soils and the compaction as you leave. So we had farmers come in, power harrowed it, just to break up that soil compaction. We seeded the buns, so they had a specially created wildflower mix created based on the
Right.
soil composition, but that was it. That was all. And then the estate went and planted some willow around the outside, but there was very little. Nothing else was seeded. It was only the buns, which were shaped like butterflies. Good for butterflies
Yeah.
and pigs. Pigs love them up there.
Okay. So the pigs are down there and they're churning up all the
Yeah.
ground.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. You will come a cropper if you don't watch where you're going. They do happen to root around, and because they're left there all year. They're even over winter. Both the cows and the pigs are left to fend for themselves, as they would have
Okay.
done centuries ago. They're not brought in. They're not fed. They're not. They calf out there. They root around out there. That's their home. So
Right.
yeah, you do notice that as the summer disappears, the routing gets quite. When I first went to Belmont in January 2023, there were some rather big holes that the pigs were getting involved in and trying to find food. So
Yeah. So how do you manage soil mobilization when you're working on a project like that? Like you've described your route in and your route out. That
So,
sounds really
so you,
familiar.
well, you've got two types. One, if you've got soil mobilisation in watercourses, which obviously is managed using silk curtains or baffles or silk fencing. The only precaution we took, because of where the spoil was being deposited and most of the works were being done dry, we could put a silk curtain in. So that stops obviously the silt moving downstream. All the excavations, barring the backwater creation on the Lanjo River, was created dry. So there was no mobilisation of soils into the watercourse, which is always good. Excuse me. And then whilst we were moving materials around, as I touched on, we had haul roads. That was it. And obviously the machines also had Encon on them. So whilst the excavator could park up in one spot and do his shaping and his excavating, it meant we weren't tracking backwards and forwards over the same spot to get a finer detail. So you're managing soil compaction or reducing soil compaction that way. You're also working out. So if you're building a scrape, so the new channel has 9 scrapes across the outside of it, but you're working back towards a certain point. So you're not then compacting areas that don't need to be compacted. You're literally working on areas that you're going to dig. So actually,
Yeah.
you're not compacting it. But the most important one is the soil movements to and from the stockpiles. And by having one route, and limiting potential damage to those soils, but if you have an extended period of rain or whatever, then you just go, okay, well, we'll go and do something else, or we'll stockpile the spoil near to where we're being excavated, and we'll just stand the dumper and the tractors and the trailers down. Or you can use tracked machinery, and fortunately enough, we didn't have to use a track dumper at Belmont. It's two reasons. One, you couldn't get it onto site, but also you're limited by the amount of material you can carry in it. We were getting more material in a tractor and a 16-ton dump trailer than I could have got on a track dumper. So actually, I was reducing the number of movements by actually scaling up the way of moving the material. So that's kind of how you protect the ground when you're moving, and just obviously communication with your operators and saying, look, that's your haul road. I don't want to see you driving diagonally because it's shorter. That's if you've got to
Yeah.
take that slightly longer route because you're following what's going to be excavated, so be it.
Yeah. So planning in advance, being really mindful of what you're doing,
Yeah,
that's the key.
exactly
That
that.
sounds really good. Yeah. Okay, cool. I was going to ask you, do you feel comfortable sharing a project where you've been disappointed or like a circumstance where you've been disappointed or frustrated that you were able to find a solution to? Just like, because I think often we don't share enough these things because we're all worried about like the PR image, but actually sometimes we can solve really difficult problems and it can be really helpful to other people to hear how we solve them in a positive way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been fortunate that I've not had any major catastrophes or projects that haven't gone the way I was expecting. I've kind of always not known, that's the wrong word, but it got to where it needed to be by hook or by crook. No project
I
is
think,
no project is ever 100% exact, but I can't think of one project that had major issues particularly. Yeah, there were a couple of. There was one down on the Kennet. We installed the wrong posts on a revetment, but actually, when you go back and the conversations that happened at the time were actually not having a 150 mil post and having a 100 mil post actually made no difference to the revetment, because a 100 mil post is still a 100 mil, but it's still a lump of wood. Okay, it's 50 mil, slightly thinner in diameter, but actually, yeah,
impact.
we did a whole load of stuff. Some people, some sort of mentors or mentor that I use quite a lot. he's now coming to the end of his career. I think he's probably not going to. He won't listen, I'm sure. But I think he's coming up for 80. So but Glenn's been around for decades, and we got Glenn involved, and he kind of said, well, actually, exactly that. It's not going to make any difference. And the designer went, all right, fair enough, take that. We had to guarantee it for another year, another defects year, but it didn't make a difference. Those. I mean, I haven't been back to the Kennet, but I'm sure those posts are still there, and they haven't done anything. That's probably the only one really that sort of comes to mind. I can't think of anything major that's gone completely
No.
Pete Tong.
Well, perhaps, you've just described how you manage silt mobilization and things like that. Maybe by really thinking through the projects in advance, you've mitigated against those things kind of happening because you've really thought through, right, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it?
Yeah,
Telling me like, oh, well, we're doing it in this sequence. You're mitigating it before it
yeah,
even happens. So
yeah,
that sounds really good. So this other question, these are like things that I like to ask people. So I hope you
yeah,
don't
yeah.
mind me asking. Is there something in line with your work that a person such as a landowner could do for themselves that would have a meaningful benefit for their project? So I gave the example about kind of after a flood or during rainfall, if someone's got a problem with water, just taking some photos and setting up a map. Oh, it ponds over here, it runs down here. It can just be really helpful with communication. That's a really easy thing that someone can do for themselves. Do you have anything like that that you would want to share with people?
Don't be afraid to ask for advice and help.
Okay.
They're the main ones.
Like you said about your mentor, like, so
Yeah,
you turn to somebody and say, "I've got this problem. Have you come across this before? What do you think
yeah,
about this?"
yeah, exactly that.
Yeah,
None of us profess to know all of it. Some people do, but I certainly don't. And we can't know it all. So, but there's always someone around that knows something, especially if you're dealing with water. It does strange things. On one site you expect it to do X, Y, and Z, but actually on another site it does A, B, and C, and you're like, but the sites are almost the same. They're dead flat or they're steep or whatever. Water just has that innate ability of being a complete pain in the proverbials and going, oh no, no, you're supposed to go that way and you've gone that way, and that's just the way it is. But you don't be afraid to ask for help. LinkedIn is a wonderful tool. Yes,
yeah.
yes, it's getting a little bit too political for my liking. There's lots of people being very outspoken on it, but it is a wonderful tool. You and I, for example, wouldn't have, would we 10 years ago, would we have known each
I
other?
know, and that's crazy, isn't it? Because you're based in Bristol
Yeah,
and I've been based in Stroud, not that far apart from each other,
yeah.
but yeah,
Look,
via the power of
and
LinkedIn,
I wouldn't
made
have
that
known that you went to Birmingham Uni and I was working not a million miles away from Birmingham Uni last week or this week. So,
yeah, exactly.
there
Yeah,
is always someone around who knows something. So just
yeah, and
ask.
is willing to dispense with that
Yeah.
advice as well. Yeah,
Generally
yeah,
speaking, there aren't many people in this industry that aren't willing to, dispense free advice. If you keep coming
yeah,
back and asking for it, they might ask for some money, but generally speaking, 2 or 3 times, people go, "Yeah, no worries, crack on."
yeah,
So
yeah. I
there you
like it. Great advice. And on that note, what advice would you give to someone starting out on their journey to implement measures to restore
go.
natural features and processes? Is there a piece of advice that you would give them?
Understand the land. So
Understand.
you've got to understand what you've got. And actually, is a watercourse the best thing? Is tree planting the best thing? Or actually just creating a meadow? You need to understand what was there before it was farmed. Was the area an ancient? Was the area a forest? Well, okay. Well, actually, that kind of then leads itself to maybe we should just plant some trees. Was it just a meadow? Oh, well, actually, maybe we should just plant a meadow. So you need to go back. You need to do your research. You need to understand the ground conditions, the site. Hey, I'd love it if everyone just built wetlands, but likewise, wetlands have to be in the right place at the right time, much
Yeah.
like tree planting.
Yeah.
That's a real bugbear of mine. Is the whole plant trees, save the planet kind of idea. Yes, they will help save the planet, but wetlands sequester more carbon and blah, 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 blah. But stop
You're a
planting
wetland.
trees for the sake of planting trees, for God's sake. But so you've got to understand what was there. that's my advice: is understand your land, understand your ground conditions and your site.
Okay, great. I like that too. So I think that was such a great chat. Thank you so much, Nick. Do you want to do the fun questions?
Yeah, go on. Let's do the fun questions. Fun
Okay.
questions.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Tea. Go for a walk or read a book?
Well, you didn't give me the option to go to the pub, so I'm going to go for a read. I do a lot of reading, especially on holiday. But we'll go for a book.
Read a book, not walk to the pub.
I didn't realise that was an option. Walk to the pub.
Run or cycle?
Running around playing football.
Running. Cool. So if you had a day off from all responsibilities, home and work, no restrictions, what would you do?
Have lunch with Stephen Fry.
Okay.
Because he's
Why?
cool. Because he's just Stephen Fry. He's very funny, very intelligent. He's just a legend. So there you go. That's what I would do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much,
That's
Nick.
right.
That was such an interesting conversation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you much for having me on.
No, seriously, my pleasure.
I'll send you some pictures of Belmont separately.
Yes, please do. I was just thinking though, because you kept looking up, and actually, it would be really cool if I can edit them in so people can see what you were looking at, because they were obviously helping you visualize it. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
No worries. I'll send them separately.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. See you later, Catherine. Be good.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please can I ask that you share it with someone else that you think might find it interesting. And on a final note, I just want to add a short disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a replacement for professional advice. We suggest that you seek out the help of a trained professional for help with your specific situation.